We are very honored to have him with us to deliver the Aqaid lectures. In the last lecture, the Sheikh spoke about the fourth root of religion, which is Imamah. He spoke about the role of the Imams and provided a short introduction of who the 12 Imams from the 12 school are. He also touched upon the philosophy of Imamah, which in short is that the Imams are the guardians of the authenticity of Islam. Inshallah, there'll be an opportunity at the end for questions, so please do write them in the chat section. And without taking up any more time, I'd like to welcome Sheikh Mohamed Hadi with a salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. Is the sound clear or not?
The sound is clear, we can hear you.
Okay. Do you have the PowerPoint, the slides?
Yeah, the screen is shared.
Okay. So do you have them?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, fine. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير الخلق أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So in this lecture, which will be the last lecture, we will have a new topic. So if you remember, the two previous lectures were on an asl from Usul al-Din. As we said, on the second lecture was on prophethood, and the third one was on the Imam, al-Imam. This last lecture will be on a new topic, which is not an asl from Usul al-Din, but which is aqidah topic, and it's a topic which is usually used as an accusation against the Shia Muslims. So this topic will be at-taqiyya. So at-taqiyya, before focusing on its meaning, let's see what's the accusation. The accusation held by anti-Shia movements or anti-Shia propaganda is that Shia are hypocrites and liars who try to deceive non-Shia Muslims by hiding their true deviant beliefs through taqiyya. And this accusation was very present in the previous centuries among anti-Shia scholars. So you could find them in books and the lectures and so on. However, it's still very present nowadays in the current anti-Shia propaganda, in the new books published, in their lectures, and now on internet or TV channels or YouTube and so on. So we will focus on this topic today, which is taqiyya. First of all, what does taqiyya mean? What's the meaning of taqiyya? Taqiyya, first of all, it can be translated in English by religious dissimulation. Taqiyya is the practice of concealing one's beliefs when under threat of death or the threat of another considerable danger. For example, let's take an example. A few years ago, ISIS the terrorist group ISIS, known also as Daesh, they took a lot of regions in Iraq. And you can find videos and so on, unfortunately, on the internet, when they used to catch a Shia Muslim, they would torture him, they would humiliate him, and they would kill him. Actually, cut his head and film it and put it on the internet. So if a Shia Muslim is in this situation, where a terrorist group like ISIS catch him, they ask him, are you a Shia or a Sunni? And he knows, if he answers that he is a Shia, that he has Shia beliefs, he knows that he will be killed, that they will torture him and kill him and cut his head, put it on the internet and so on. So in this case, he's allowed, in the Shia doctrine and the Shia beliefs, he's allowed to use what we call at-taqiyya. It means to conceal his beliefs, to hide them. So for example, he can say, I'm not a Shia, I'm a Sunni. I'm like you are Sunni. The purpose is not to be killed by them. So in other words, taqiyya is a tool or a way of self-defense. Of course, it can be justified by the threat of death or another considerable danger. For example, they will not kill you, but they will cut your hand or torture you or send you to jail, or they will not directly kill you, but they will kill your family members or your friends or your neighbors, or you will have a very big pressure and so on. So it's not always just allowed under threat of death. It can be also allowed in the situation of other considerable dangers or harms, being injured, tortured, and so on. In these cases, as a way of self-defense, it's allowed in the Shia belief to conceal our beliefs. Of course, we will see now the following question. Is taqiyya permitted in Islam? Is it allowed in Islam? So you know, whether it is taqiyya or another topic or another issue, we always have to ask ourselves if this thing, this question, this issue is allowed in Islam or not, because we are Muslims and we follow our religion, Islam, and as practicing believers, we have to follow the rules of this religion because we believe in it and we joined this religion. So the question is taqiyya allowed in Islam? In other words, or what's the opinion of the Holy Quran on taqiyya? Of course, taqiyya, as I presented it in the definition, it's concealing the beliefs when under danger of threat or another big danger. It's not someone who just doesn't have any danger or any threat. You just want to play with it and so on. No, it's really as I presented it in the definition. So Allah spoke about taqiyya in a way or another in more than one verse in the Holy Quran. The first verse is in Surah Al-Nahl. Allah says, whoever disbelieves in Allah after his belief, except for one who is forced while his heart is secure in faith. But those who willingly open their breasts to disbelief, upon them is wrath from Allah, and for them is a great punishment. So in this verse, clearly, you have general ruling, which is logical and normal and well known, is that if you disbelieve, so you were a believer, then you left these beliefs, you left your religion, and you joined the disbelievers, and you became a disbeliever. In this case, which is very logical, in the hereafter, you will have a great punishment from Allah. However, in this verse, in this general rule, Allah puts an exception. He says, except for one who is forced, while his heart is secure in faith. Why? Because this person is forced to do it, but in his heart, he's a Muslim, he's a believer. The Shia, when he's caught, and when he lies and he says, he does taqiyya and he says, I'm a Sunni, I'm not a Shi'i, it's not because he's a hypocrite, because he's forced. He knows, and it existed in Islamic history. Fortunately, we'll speak about it. Nowadays, it exists also in a lot of regions. It's very difficult to be a Shi'i. In a lot of regions, you can be killed just because you are a Shi'i. So in this case, it's not hypocrites. It's not hypocrisy. It's not being a hypocrite. It's just a way of self-defense, because this person is forced to do it. But in his heart, he holds his beliefs and he maintains his beliefs. But in certain situations, he might be forced to have to express apparently with other beliefs, so to conceal his beliefs. The context of this verse is very important. So you can go check any Sunni or Shia tafsir. So I didn't bring any sources because it's a very known fact on the tafsir of this verse. Go check any Sunni or even Shia tafsir. It's very known, and the tafsir of this verse. This verse was revealed to, it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad on the issue of Ammar ibn Yasir. So Ammar ibn Yasir is a companion of the Prophet Muhammad. And even in Shia Islam, he's very respected. We consider that Ammar ibn Yasir is part of the very few companions who remained loyal to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad after his death. And he was very close to Imam Ali. He was always with Imam Ali, even after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And even his death, actually, he was killed with Imam Ali, so fighting with Imam Ali against Muawiyah. So in the Battle of Siffin, it's a very famous battle. Imam Ali with his army against Muawiyah and his army, and he was killed in the Battle of Siffin. So he was fighting against Muawiyah. He was with Imam Ali. Anyway, the context of this verse is that at the beginning of Islam, in Mecca, the situation was very difficult for the Muslims. Very difficult for the Muslims. When we read Sirah, we understand that the situation was very difficult. They were hated by the Qurayshi people, the disbelievers, the unbelievers in Mecca. They were tortured, they were killed, some of them, and so on. Unfortunately, the first followers of the Prophet Muhammad, so the first Muslims, some of them were tortured and publicly tortured. Especially the first Muslims who followed the Prophet Muhammad and who were part of what we can call the lower social class. Most of them, they didn't have any Meccan tribe, so they were foreigners in Mecca. And in the Arabic Peninsula, having a tribe was very important socially, because the tribe is the institution which will protect you. So don't forget that you don't live in a state with rules and the rule of law and so on. No, you live in an Arabic Peninsula where the most important thing is the tribe. The tribe will protect you. A part of the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, there were people from the lower social class in Mecca. They didn't have a tribe to protect them, and they were very poor. And actually, a big part of them who were tortured and killed and so on, they were also slaves. So the very, very lower class in Mecca. A very famous example is Bilal. So Bilal was tortured because he became Muslim, and they knew it. His masters, they knew it. So he was tortured publicly and so on. You know his story. Anyway, Ammar ibn Yasir, so he's the son of Yasir and Sumayya. The three, so the parents of Ammar and Ammar, they became Muslims. But because they were part of the lower class and they were not Meccan originally, I think they were from Yemenite origins. So they were from Yemen, and they were poor and so on. They were actually tortured like Bilal. They were tortured under the burning sun, publicly, in front of the people, and the unbelievers in Mecca killed Sumayya. They first killed Sumayya. So they tortured Sumayya until killing her. That's why we say Sumayya is the first martyr of Islam, the first Shahida of Islam. Then they killed also Yasir. So they tortured Yasir, the father of Ammar, until killing him. Then they came to Ammar ibn Yasir and they tortured him. And Ammar, because he saw his parents being killed because they were Muslims, and because he was himself being tortured, he accepted to speak well about the pagan gods, the gods of the unbelievers, and to say that he will leave the religion of Muhammad, and that he worshipped their gods, and he spoke well about their gods. And because he did that, they let him go away and they stopped torturing him. But Ammar ibn Yasir was in a very bad situation. He had his own parents being killed, and he went to the Prophet Muhammad and he confessed. He said, "Oh, Prophet of God, I have been forced to speak well about their gods and to say that I worship them and so on. And I'm very scared about being an unbeliever." So the Prophet Muhammad said to him, "What is in your heart?" He said, in my heart, there is nothing else than Islam. There is nothing else than Allah. I don't believe in worship in their gods. I'm a Muslim in my heart, but I have been forced. So the Prophet Muhammad said to him, "Don't worry, you are in a good situation. Don't worry. What you did was the right thing." And Allah, in this occasion, in this context, revealed this verse. Whoever disbelieves in Allah after his belief, except for one who is forced while his heart is secure in faith. So that's the first verse. The second verse is in Surah Al-Imran, verse 28. Allah says, "Let not the believers take for allies unbelievers rather than believers. If any do that, in nothing will there be help from Allah, except by way of precaution, that you may guard yourselves from them." So again, in this verse, Allah speaks about a general rule, which is that as a believer in your religion, you cannot take the unbelievers as allies in your religion, in your belief. And of course, if you do it, you cannot hope any help from Allah. However, there is an exception. The exception is the taqiyya, when someone is forced. So when someone is forced, he can't take them as allies because he's in a special situation. He doesn't have the choice. If he doesn't do it, if he doesn't take them as allies, he will be killed. إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاتًا, except by way of precaution that you may guard yourself from them. So that's the second verse. The third verse is in Surah Ghafir. So Allah says in this verse. So first, let me give you the context. In the story of Musa, when he was in Egypt, and he was against the Pharaoh, there was a man from the people of Pharaoh, or from his family. So the verse say Ali Pharaoh. Can be translated by the family of Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, and sometimes it's translated by the people of Pharaoh. So someone who is very close to Pharaoh. This mu'min min Ali Pharaoh, this believer who was from the people of Pharaoh, he was a believer, but he couldn't show it. He was concealing his faith, hiding it. Why? Because Pharaoh was not like a very democratic guy. He was a dictator, a man who considered himself as a god, and who was very tyrannic. So you know the story of Musa. He killed a lot of Israelite babies and so on. So he's a very dangerous man if you show your true belief and you show him that you believe in God, that you don't believe that he's a God. Anyway, Allah says in the Holy Quran, and the believing man from the family of Pharaoh, who was concealing his faith, said, do you kill a man merely because he says, my Lord is Allah, while he has brought you clear proofs from your Lord? So Allah is speaking about a believing man from Ali Pharaoh, who was concealing his faith. Of course, in the whole verse and in the whole surah, and Allah speaks about this person, this mu'min, this believer, he speaks in a very positive way. And we learn in this verse that he was concealing his faith. So actually, taqiyya is not a new thing. It was used by Shia, but also by non-Shia people, by good people, even at the time of Musa, even among the family of Pharaoh, by believers who were in situation where it was justified. It was important to use taqiyya to defend themselves against being killed or injured or tortured and so on. So as we saw, taqiyya is allowed in the Holy Quran. So we took the example of these three verses. Is also allowed in the Sunnah, the Hadith. So we took the story of Ammar ibn Yasir. The first verse was revealed for the situation of Ammar ibn Yasir. And in the Sunnah, the Seerah of the Prophet, his biography, you can find a lot of cases, not only Ammar ibn Yasir. So as we said, the first period of Islam, the first years when the Prophet announced that he's a prophet in Mecca, the situation of the first Muslims was very difficult, especially for the poor people, as I said. So So people like Abu Bakr and Uthman, they didn't have any problem. Why? Because Abu Bakr and Uthman, they come from very powerful tribes who can protect them, and from also wealthy families. But Ammar ibn Yasir, Bilal, they are slaves and poor people, and who will protect them? So in the Sunnah and the Sirah of the Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet allowed to use taqiyya, and a lot of companions, when they were under danger, they use it. Last but not least, it's very important. Taqiyya is a normal thing in regards to human nature. You know, no one likes to hide his beliefs. And the human nature likes to have freedom. And a normal human likes to express as he wants, to express his beliefs, to have freedom, to live normally, to not be forced to hide his beliefs and so on. But if he is forced, what does it mean if he's forced? If he doesn't do it, he will have a big danger and threat on his life, or injuries, or say a big, for example, physical and psychological pressure, and so on. It's normal, it's rational and normal in regard to human nature to use it in these situations as a self-defense tool. It's not even something that is incredible and exceptional. When in this situation, in regards to human nature, is very normal. So taqiyya in Shia Islam, and our belief as Shia Muslims, is that taqiyya is allowed in certain conditions and situations. So you can find more details in fiqh books. Usually they speak about, Shia scholars, they speak about taqiyya on a theoretical level in aqaid books, then on a practical level on fiqh books. For example, in Minhaj al-Salihin by Sayyid Sistani, Sayyid Sistani will speak about taqiyya in chapters like the chapter of al-wudu. So as you know, Shia Muslims, we have a different wudu, a different way of performing the wudu than the Sunni Muslims. So Sayyid Sistani speak about taqiyya in this chapter, in a lot of chapters, but among them in this chapter, because there are a lot of questions from people who are forced to perform the Sunni way of doing wudu, because they are forced, because they are under threat or danger and so on. However, in some situations, taqiyya can be forbidden in some cases. When doing taqiyya will lead you to kill innocent people or to corrupt religious principles or other dangerous consequences, and the Shi'i Ja'fari fiqh, it's not allowed. So it depends on the situation, the conditions, and so on. You have a hadith, which I think is in Al-Kafi, Shi'i hadith in Al-Kafi. You can also find it in Wasail Shia. Imam al-Baqir says, إنما جعلت التقية ليحقن بها الدم فإذا بلغ الدم فلا تقية. Imam al-Baqir, in this hadith, he says, taqiyya was established in order to protect blood. What does it mean? ليحقن بها الدم, protect blood, is a term used in Arabic in order to say and the meaning of it is to protect people, to protect blood, it's to protect people from being killed. فإذا بلغ الدم فلا تقية. So if doing taqiyya leads you or leads to kill innocent people, so there is no taqiyya. There is no acceptable taqiyya. You can't do taqiyya. So, for example, ISIS, they catch you, for example, in Iraq. So they ask you, are you a Shi'i or a Sunni? You answer, I am a Sunni. And then they say, so good, so we have the same point of view and so on, and we will not kill you. But we caught a Shi'i boy, a very young Shi'i boy yesterday, and we would like that you kill him. That you kill him, cut his head, and we'll film you and put it on internet, as they did. And on internet you can find hundreds of videos where they kill Shia. In this case, continuing in this taqiyya is not allowed. In order to continue in your taqiyya, you have to kill an innocent man. In this case, innocent young boy. In this case, it's not allowed. If the consequence of your action, of your taqiyya, is to kill innocent people, it's not allowed, and it's haram, and in our fiqh. So, taqiyya is very linked with the situation that the different situation that you can find. It depends. So there is an important question: why some Shia in history they were forced to use it, and even more than other Muslims, and why some Shia Muslims are still forced to use it, to use taqiyya? The question is very simple, because Shia Muslims were always a minority among a dominant majority, and they were always considered as deviant people, as heretics. And in Islamic history, they were often persecuted and killed. So if you see, there are a lot of examples. For example, Al-Hajjaj was the governor of Bani Umayyah in Iraq, and he was crazy. He was famous because he used to kill a lot of Shia in Iraq. He killed thousands and thousands of people. So at the time of Al-Hajjaj in Iraq, as a Shi'i, you had 4 options: being killed, or sent to jail, or being forced to go very far. So at his time, a lot of tribes, Shia Arabic tribes, they went to Iran, very far regions, in order to escape his crazy dictatorship. And the last option was to perform taqiyya. So why Shia Muslims use taqiyya more than Sunni Muslims? Because they had to use it more, because they were a minority and persecuted minority and killed under the Bani Umayyah, the Umayyads, under the Abbasid caliphs, under the rulers, the Sunni rulers in history, unfortunately. So they were in countries where the majority group was intolerant and very aggressive against them. That's why they used to use taqiyya. They were forced. And I will tell you something. No one on earth likes to hide his beliefs. That's in human nature. Everyone likes to show his beliefs, to have freedom of speech, to have religious freedoms, freedom of belief, to have civil rights. That's the original situation of humans. So no one will do it just because he loves it. If someone is forced to conceal his faith, he will do it because he's forced. Otherwise, in human nature, humans, they love to have freedom of speech and freedom of belief and so on. And until now, unfortunately, so even a lot of Shia, they think that taqiyya doesn't exist anymore because these people, this Shia, they live in democratic countries with civil rights, with freedom of speech and so on, and with a as it is called rule of law and so on. But in a lot of regions, until now, being a Shi'i is a reason for some anti-Shia people to be killed. So today, if you watch the news, there was a terrorist attack in Afghanistan, in Kabul, the capital, against a school. So a school, Shia girls' school. So a school for Shia girls in a Shi'i neighborhood in Kabul, in the capital of Afghanistan. And 50 people, most of them girls from the school, were killed. So until now, you have a lot of terrorist attack against Shia in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan. You have a lot of persecution and discrimination against Shia in a lot of regions in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, and Nigeria, and so on. So a lot of people are forced, until now, some of the Shia are forced to use taqiyya. And if they don't use it, they will be killed. And unfortunately, it still exists. However, when you look at history, as I said, taqiyya actually it's a normal thing. It's a normal thing when in regard to human nature. So it was not always only used by Shia Muslims. Sometimes it was also used by Sunni Muslims and other religious communities, because sometimes they were in situations where they had to use it. So as an example, Sunni Muslims and Jews in South Spain after the Reconquista. So as you know, South Spain, Al-Andalus, it was an Islamic region, or a region where the rulers were Muslims. And actually there were a lot of communities, Muslims, Jews, Christians, and so on. But the rulers, so the political system and so on, it was in the hands of Muslims. Then after centuries, the Catholics, so from the north, the Catholics took all the region of Al-Andalus, and they call it in Spain, in Spanish, la Reconquista, so the reconquest. After the Reconquista, a lot of Sunni Muslims and Jews, they were forced to escape and to go to mainly North Africa, and some of them in the Middle East. However, most of them, they went to North Africa. However, some of the Sunni Muslims and the Jewish community, they couldn't go to North Africa, and they remained in Spain, and they were forced to convert into Catholicism. However, a lot of them, and maybe most of them, they didn't really convert into Catholicism, because these Sunni Muslims, they had in their heart the belief in Islam and Sunni Islam. The Jewish community also, they had in their belief, in their heart, the Jewish beliefs. So they pretended to be Catholics, but privately they remained Sunni Muslims, and Jews remained Jews. And so they had the practice of taqiyya. that's a good example that even Sunni Muslims who very often in the anti-Shia, not all Muslim Sunnis. I'm not saying that it's all the Sunnis that will accuse the Shia. I'm speaking about the Sunni Muslims who are working in the anti-Shia movement and the anti-Shia propaganda nowadays and in the past. They accuse Shia Muslims of something that even Sunni Muslims in history, they had to practice in some cases because it was normal, it was to protect themselves. So later, so the Catholic rulers, they were not stupid. They understood that a big part of these new converts, they remained Sunni Muslims and they remained Jews in their private life inside their houses and so on. So that's why they had a special court, religious court called the Inquisition, which had the mission of persecuting and killing and so on the heretics, so the Protestants, but also the people who pretended to be Catholics while being in private Sunni Muslims or Jews. So that was the last point of our lecture today. I hope that these lectures during this holy month were useful for you, inshallah. So if you have any question, feel free to ask them, and inshallah we'll answer to them.
Thank you, Sheikhna, for yet another wonderful lecture. It is very unfortunate that taqi is actually quite misunderstood. As you explained, taqi is not actually a new concept, and it has been around and used in history by countless righteous people. And in addition to it being permissible, according to the Quran and the Sunnah, it is also human nature that causes a human being to use taqiyya in an occasion where they are being forced to. If you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat section. We actually have a few already. Is it possible for someone to actually choose death instead of concealing their faith?
According to some hadith, yes. So someone could say, I want to be a shaheed. I don't want to be forced to hide my beliefs. However, it depends on some other conditions. For example, if showing your true beliefs will not only lead to these enemies to kill you, but also to kill other members of your family, for example, or friends or neighbors, it's not allowed. So there are hadiths which kind of give the permission of choosing death. However, you can find other hadiths who don't give this permission to Shia. Let's say until the apparition of Imam al-Mahdi, if you find yourself in this situation, you have to practice taqiyya. So we have both hadiths. So it depends on the context and so on. However, yes, we have both hadiths actually.
Okay. And also, since this is the last lecture in the series, are there any books that you would recommend for further reading on aqaid?
A very good book is Aqaid al-Imamiyya. So it's a very small book. It's maybe 40 pages, and it has been translated in English. In English, its name is The Faith of Shia Imamiyya. For a beginner, it's a very good book because it was written by a big scholar, Sheikh Al-Mudaffar, and his aim was to sum up aqaid in a very simple way. Because when you go to some books, it's very difficult. So aqaid al-Imamiyya, and what is very good is that you have it in English, so translated in English. Then if you speak Arabic, you can use Bidayat al-Ma'arif al-Ilahiyya, written by Sayyid al-Kharrazi. It's in Arabic. It's a sharh, it's a commentary on aqaid al-Imamiyya. So if you want to go further, it's very good because it's very, very detailed. It's one of the best books. Unfortunately, I have books that are in Arabic, so you can use Usul al-Aqaid written by said Mohammed Saeed Al-Hakim. He's a marja in Najaf. It's also very simple. So I will not go in very complicated discussions. He's very simple and it's very good. You have a book in English written by Sheikh Ja'far Subhani. He's an Iranian scholar. I think the name is the Doctrines of Shia, I think. And it has been translated in English. It's somehow also not bad, it's good. So these books are very good. I used also some of them for the lectures.
Thank you for those recommendations, Sheikhna. So if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to end the session by thanking you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And I'd also like to thank the organizers and Dar al-Hikmah for organizing these aqa'id lectures in English. Please do remember us all in your du'ats, and fi amanillah.
And thank you for Dar al-Hikmah and also all the brothers and sisters who joined us. I hope that these lectures were somehow useful, inshallah. And hopefully we may see you again in future lectures, inshallah. Don't forget me in your dua, and fi amanillah.